Hi everyone. Today I'm going to go over a sample outline for project number 3. Hopefully by now you have read most, if not all, of your novel, $2 a Day, and you have started thinking about what kind of topic you might want to write about. If you have not gotten that far yet, that's okay. That's what hopefully this lecture will help you get to. So just to review the individual paper handout, I included some notes here on what you should include in your essay. You should include an introduction with a clear thesis, a summary of the text, body paragraphs with supporting points to make a case for your argument, a rebuttal paragraph, and a conclusion. Today I'm going to go over those a little bit more in depth and provide an outline for you to follow along when you're drafting up your essay. Your final essay, just as a reminder, should be between 1,000 and 1,500 words, so about 4 to 6 pages, double spaced. And since you are bringing in outside sources as well as quotes from your novel, you do need to have a works cited page. So here is the sample outline for project number 3. And this is also available under the Files section of Canvas in the folder titled titled Project Number 3. So you'll be able to find this outline there, but I do want to go over it as well. So your introduction should start with some kind of a hook. Again, this is typically a quote or a statistic, something that really stood out to you that hooks the reader in. Try to challenge yourself beyond just asking a question. That's a kind of elementary way of introducing an essay. So see if you can challenge yourself to pull out an interesting statistic or a quote from the text to introduce your essay. Then in that paragraph, you're going to introduce the novel with the title and both authors, and in one sentence, what it was about. You will introduce the topic that you chose to write about, maybe give a few sentences background on that. And then you need to develop your thesis. And your thesis should be at the end of your introduction paragraph. It should be your last sentence. Your thesis should include the topic you are choosing to write about and the clear argument that you are making. So what is it that you are trying to argue? As a reminder, this is a persuasive paper. This is not a research article. This is not information. This is not narrative. The purpose of this essay is for you to argue something. So here's an example of a thesis that you could use for your essay. My example is the novel $2 a Day addressed several issues within our societal system, the most broken seeming to be the welfare system. I feel the United States welfare system needs to be completely revamped, with one of the biggest changes being recipients should be allowed to receive cash rather than just credit that can be used for certain items. So this is a very rough draft. I would have to go back and revise this quite a bit, but it's very clear what I'm trying to say and why I'm explaining that. So my topic is the welfare system. That's the topic that was addressed in the book. And when I say I feel, it's very clear to my reader that this is my opinion that I'm trying to argue. So again, this is an opinion essay that you are making an argument about. And what am I arguing? My argument, which should be pretty controversial, is that welfare recipients should be able to receive cash. Now, a lot of people would argue against that. That's actually what I want for your thesis. I want you to find a statement or make a statement that is controversial, something that other people would challenge. You don't want to say something really vague like the welfare system is broken. I think people on both sides of the fence would agree with that. So that's not really super controversial. So when you're considering how you're going to develop your thesis, make sure it's something that somebody else would argue against you. The next paragraph, really quickly and briefly, will be a summary of your text and the arguments that you're presenting. So you'll start with, again, the title and authors of the book and just take a few sentences to explain what the book was about, almost as if you're explaining it to somebody who hadn't read that book before. Now, since this is a summary, your opinions should not be in the novel. It should only be listing facts or pieces of information from the novel itself. So no opinions like this was a great novel or I didn't really like this novel because that is not the place for this. This is just a summary. What was the book about? Then at the end of this paragraph, you're going to want to segue by bringing in your specific example again for your thesis, from your thesis. So again, I might say something like, explain the book, and then end with something such as, while many of these issues that were brought up in the novel are pressing, I feel the most pressing issue is that of the welfare system. That just reintroduces the argument you're making and transitions us to your body paragraphs. Then your body paragraphs, you are going to have one supporting argument per paragraph for your thesis. So remember in the earlier part of the semester, we talked about your thesis being like your main point for the whole essay. Then you have a main idea sentence for each paragraph. And your one main idea for one paragraph should support your thesis. Only one main idea. So I would say one argument that I'm trying to make to push my thesis, my argument that welfare should be paid with cash. So you're going to use these paragraphs to convince your reader why they should agree with your argument. In these paragraphs, you need to include either a quote from the novel or a quote from an outside source, one or the other in each body paragraph. So here's an example of what I might write as a main idea sentence when I have the thesis that was above. So based on my thesis example, here is a possible main idea. One reason, notice I transition with my readers really clearly. One reason I feel welfare recipients should be able to receive their funds in cash is it could help them pay for shelter. So that's a very specific reason. Then I would use the rest of my paragraph to give examples and quotes and just discuss this further. So this is my main idea, and the rest of my paragraph will be made up of supporting details, major and minor supporting details. And so my details would give examples of how some people could use their welfare for housing and get food from food banks or other resources, but that there seems to be very few resources available to help with housing. So that's kind of what I would focus on within that paragraph. Then, paragraph number 2, you're going to make a second point to support the argument that was in your thesis. So my first point was they should receive cash to help for paying for shelter. Maybe another point I would make is that giving recipients cash would help teach them how to handle money responsibly. And then I would go in and explain that some more. So whatever points you want to make to further your argument or further your thesis is what you would put for your body paragraphs. So again, your thesis is what your essay is arguing. Your body paragraphs are going to explain, this is my first main idea of why you should agree with my thesis. Here's my second main idea. Here's my third main idea. You will likely only have room for about 3, maybe 4, but probably 3 main ideas since this essay is only 1,000 words. You do also need to include what we call a rebuttal. And a rebuttal is something that is addressed with an argumentative or opinion writing. So a rebuttal is what would the other side say to your argument. So as I said, your thesis should be controversial. You should have something that somebody else would oppose. So in order to make your argument stronger, you need to consider what would someone who's opposing me say And then how can I turn my reader back towards what I'm trying to say? That's a little bit confusing. So in this paragraph, you'll consider a strong point that someone might make against your thesis. What would the other side say? If you can think of a really strong point they might make, then you can argue against what they might say. Your goal for this paragraph is to identify what someone might argue against you, address it, and then argue back. So you get to just start arguing back with your opponents. So here's an example of how I might start out a rebuttal paragraph given the thesis example that I've given earlier in this outline. So again, my argument in my thesis is that welfare recipients should be able to receive cash. So here's an example of rebuttal. The biggest concern with giving welfare recipients cash is that they will take advantage of the system and spend cash on non-essential items like alcohol or junk food. So this is what someone would say. If I say, I think welfare recipients should receive cash, somebody else who doesn't think that way is going to say, oh no, they're just going to take advantage of it and buy alcohol or whatever they want to buy. Although this is a valid concern, and so here I'm going to try to turn my reader back to me, and surely there will always be people taking advantage of the system, people have various needs that can't be met by the current system in place. So I'm saying, here's a point against me. Yes, this is a valid concern. I see you. But people still have other needs that can't be met. While someone might think a participant using welfare funds on clothing might be frivolous, they may need a decent outfit for job interviews. I may add there, for example. Additionally, so here's another point, micromanaging the items people can buy with their welfare money is not helping them become more responsible with their funds. It's treating them more like children. If we want welfare recipients to learn how to handle their money more responsibly, they should be given absolute freedom over how they spend it. If they choose to spend it frivolously, then they will reap the consequences when their welfare runs out. And then I would probably go on a little bit more to explain that. So again, in your rebuttal, you want to just address one point that someone might argue against you. Say, yes, that is a valid concern. I see that concern. However, and then turn it back to your argument and continue to argue your thesis. Then lastly, you'll have your conclusion. And in your conclusion, again, you will restate your thesis, summarize your 3 to 4 main ideas you made in your body paragraphs, revisit your rebuttal and why they as the reader, why the reader should still agree with your argument, and then end with a concluding statement, something that wraps up the essay so it doesn't sound like you just stopped writing in the middle of your paragraph. So something really comprehensive and conclusive, maybe encouraging people to take some action based on the argument that you are making. I hope that clears up some questions and confusion you may have had about this essay. If you have an outline drafted up now, you're welcome to send it in. I will open up an optional assignment where you can submit an outline this week, and I will provide feedback on your outline for you. So I encourage you to do that. It's not required, but if you want a strong essay, it would be really beneficial if you send me just a general outline with maybe a sentence or two for each of these sections so I can give you some feedback and make sure you're headed in the right direction.